How are you, ladies and gentlemen? After yet another busy week for the Bulls, we have reached Wednesday again, and you know every Wednesday we feature your Bulls hot takes on the channel, so if you're new to the channel, feel free to leave your hot takes below in the comments and I just might include them for next week's video. So with that being said, let's dive right into the take, shall we? So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Our first take comes to us from KillerBeam. If you consider James Harden a point guard, then next year Zach Lavine has a chance to be the best shooting guard in the entire league. As of right now, he is right up there with guys like Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Paul George, and Donovan Mitchell, but I think that next season, if the Bulls are a top 4 seed and Zach improves his defense, he will have the edge over them all. So I do agree that Lavine, especially with the season that he had last year, is right up there with the guys that you mentioned. That's also if you consider Luka Doncic to be a point guard more so than a shooting guard, which I do. I know some people call Luka a shooting guard or even a point forward at the 3, but I consider him to be a point guard more than anything. The problem is James Harden. James Harden is not considered a point guard, and he really hasn't been for a while since Chris Paul joined the Rockets, and then later Russell Westbrook, and now he's even teamed up with Kyrie Irving. Yes, he was a point guard in those seasons prior to CP3 joining the Rockets, but he is most certainly a shooting guard, and as of right now, you can't put Lavine ahead of Harden. You just can't. I mean, that could change this season if Harden falls off or he gets injured, which isn't out of the realm of possibility since he's had his history with injuries, but Harden is the best shooting guard in the game right now. And really, I would put Paul George second just because he's such a great two-way player. Like you said, if Zach can really up his defensive game, that's a huge game changer and can really elevate him to being one of the best shooting guards in the league. But at least as it stands right now, Lavine just isn't there yet to be considered the best shooting guard in the league. There just is too much competition at the top for that role. Next up, we've got Zoa. Zach will have his first 60-point game next season. Well, as much as I would like to see it, because I don't think we've seen that from a Bulls player since Michael Jordan, really, but at the same time, I don't see it happening. I mean, don't forget that Lavine hadn't even put up a 50-piece until last season, in which he had that crazy first half against the Atlanta Hawks, where he put up like 38 points in the first half alone and barely finished above 50 points in a losing effort for that game. I'm all for those exciting high-scoring games by individuals, but if they don't translate into wins, I'm not really for it. I would much rather see my team win. And you also have to consider the fact that Lavine likely isn't going to be putting up the same kind of scoring numbers we saw last season now that he truly has help on the offensive end and will be sharing the offensive load with guys like DeRozan and Vucevic and even Lonzo Ball. Next, we've got YK Beats. Zach Lavine last season was better than D Rose's MVP season if the Bulls would have went to the playoffs. Oh man, you're playing with fire on this one. I mean, here's the thing. First of all, Lavine didn't make it to the playoffs. So I know you're saying if he did, it would have been considered a better season, but they didn't. And that nullifies his performance against Rose, who led his team to not just the playoffs, but the best record in the league. If you look at the numbers side by side, you think, wow, Lavine really did have a better season than Rose. He was a better scorer. He was much more efficient on offense, especially shooting from deep. The only area where Rose really excelled out over Lavine in that season was his passing, which makes sense because Rose is a point guard. And Rose was overall a better defender in that season than Lavine was last year. That's key. Which, of course, Rose was never really known for his defense, but it was better than Lavine's. Now, you can say, well, Rose had better teammates than Lavine did, which is true, but the difference between Lavine's performance last season versus Rose's MVP season is that Rose did not falter under pressure and was much more clutch in that season in the fourth quarter. I know some Bulls fans aren't going to like hearing that, but the fact of the matter is Lavine, yes, had some clutch plays here and there last season, but more often than not, turned the ball over, missed shots, took bad shots in closing minutes. And part of it was because he just tried too much sometimes because he didn't have any help on his team. And that's what separates Rose's MVP season from Lavine. Doesn't mean that Lavine can't get there, and we'll see if he can actually put up an MVP type season now that he's been given the most talent that he's had in his entire career to play alongside him. Next, we've got I Love Laurax23. Really curious to know who Laurax is. But the hot take is that Lonzo will lead the league in assists next year. That's a pretty bold take. I mean, I won't deny that his assist numbers will go up significantly, especially since, he wasn't even really being fully utilized as a point guard last season. But to say he'll finish as the league's leader in assists is a pretty big stretch. I mean, to put that into context, Lonzo's best season For him, in terms of passing, which was his rookie year, he averaged 7.2 assists per game. Last season, he averaged 5.7. Russell Westbrook led the league in assists last year with 11.7 assists per game. That is a big jump for what Lonzo has been able to do thus far in his career. I mean, you think Lonzo is going to average more assists than guys like Westbrook, Harden, Trae Young, Luka Doncic, Chris Paul, hell, even Nikola Jokic or LeBron James. I know assists are likely going to come much easier for him when he has 3 elite scorers to pass the ball to in Lavine, DeRozan, and Vucevic, but I don't see him finishing as the league's assist leader. Maybe top 5, even that I think is a stretch. I would say he's likely going to finish top 10 in the league in assists, which is still very good. Next we've got, and this one is good, it's actually a conversation, this is from the Discord, which you can always leave your hot takes on the Discord in the hot takes channel, but the first hot take is from Brian W., and it's Zach Lavine is going to win the 3-point contest this year, and Patrick Williams will win Most Improved Player, followed by a hot take from Spitfire tagging onto that take, and it's that Zach Lavine and Aaron Gordon will have another rematch dunk contest. Well, first let me address Patrick Williams winning Most Improved Player of the Year, and I'm going to just go through this one really quickly because we had basically the same hot take a couple weeks back. I think Patrick isn't going to make that type of leap in just his second season, especially since he's likely not going to get that much exposure on offense with a new roster that's constructed around him. So too soon for Williams to win that award in his sophomore season. As for the other takes around the All-Star Weekend contest, I mean, sure, I could see Lavine winning the 3-point contest. You know, he has an incredible stroke, was one of the most efficient 3-point shooters last season and could easily take that trophy. As for Lavine versus Gordon in a dunk contest rematch, can't say I see that happening, especially because Aaron Gordon made it pretty clear he was a little bitter that he lost it that second time and probably should have won like he did the first time when he went up against Zach Lavine when Lavine was with the Wolves. And he even said, I'm not going to compete in it anymore. Lavine, I believe, has also said something similar to that effect. You know, I've won it twice. I don't really need to do it again. If they did have a rematch, though, I do think Lavine would win again. And I do agree that it would be fun and entertaining of a dunk contest, as the dunk contest really hasn't been that great since that specific matchup that we saw a few years back between Lavine and Gordon. Next up, we've got Alessandro Lamalfa. We will be better than the Miami Heat next season, both in the regular season and playoffs. So this is an interesting one because all of us Bulls fans are pretty frustrated by the fact that most fans and media are downplaying the Bulls this offseason, in fact even criticizing it, while at the same time absolutely praising the moves made by the Heat, which, as unbiased as I'm trying to see it, aren't better moves than what the Bulls did. They overpaid for Kyle Lowry, who was older, more injury prone, and wasn't as productive as DeMar DeRozan last season. They offered Jimmy Butler a max extension, which I get it, they kind of had to, but they're going to be paying him near $50 million by the time he's 36 years old. And yes, somehow DeRozan and Lonzo were overpays, and they gave Duncan Robinson a massive $90 million contract, which, don't get me wrong, I like Robinson, but he's really just a spot-up shooter. So will the Heat be a good team? Yeah, they will be. They'll be competitive and one of the top teams in the East, no question, but when people act like they're title contenders or will finish top 2 in the East, I just don't see how that's possible. And I do agree that if you look at how the teams match up, how the Heat match up against the Bulls anyway, I mean, the Bulls without a doubt have more offensive firepower than the Heat do. The Heat, although, are substantially better on the defensive end. Solving for Bam Adebayo and guarding him would be a challenge for the Bulls for sure, but also the Heat will have a hard time guarding Lavine and DeRozan. It's not like Jimmy Butler is going to be able to guard both of them all by himself, and we know Robinson is not a good defender. And yes, the Heat have more veteran experience, especially with the additions of Kyle Lowry, but that vet experience won't mean much when it comes to keeping up with our younger guys. So in short, I think they're pretty evenly matched. The Heat may have the slight edge this season, but going forward, I really don't see the Heat being that great of a team once those contracts of Butler and Lowry start looking worse and worse as they age. Next up, we've got Just a Bum. The Bulls will take the league by storm with being the number 1 seed and making the finals and shutting up the critics. I wish, my man, but no, that isn't going to happen. I mean, you have to remember, most of these guys are new to the team. They've barely had a chance to play together. There's going to be a learning curve, and although, yes, the Bulls are going to greatly improve from what they were last season, the East is just way too competitive this year for them to finish with the number 1 seed and making it to the finals. Next, we've got Jamie Cummins. The Bulls should have done more to keep Thad young. He's exactly what's missing from this current roster. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, Thad would have been a perfect fit for this roster to fill out the backup power forward role that he played so well last season. I wouldn't say that, they didn't do what they could have done to keep him, though. I mean, the fact of the matter is Thad's salary for his age and the fact that he wasn't a part of the Bulls' long-term plans, it didn't make sense for them. They needed to be able to free up cap space to bring in a star-level player like DeRozan. Now, there have been reports that Markkanen was initially supposed to be a part of that sign and trade deal with the Spurs instead of Thaddeus, but then Markkanen wanted more money than the Spurs were willing to pay him. Again, that's just what's been reported. It hasn't been confirmed or anything, but if that is in fact the case, I mean, the front office really just ran out of options to make the salaries work for a sign and trade with DeRozan and give up Thad as a result. I wish they would have kept him, but I think you also have to look at the bigger and long-term picture here. And although Thad would have been a great fit for this team this season, the front office is looking more in the long run. Let's do one more, and this one is from Adam De Bertoli. Bulls let Lavine walk in free agency and move Coby White to starting shooting guard in 2022-23. Wow. Well, first let me just say that if there is anything we know about this front office is that they don't just let guys walk for free. If they even get a slight hint that Lavine isn't going to re-sign with the Bulls, they're going to look to trade him to get something in return, or even pull a sign and trade next offseason rather than just letting him walk for nothing in free agency. But again, I think that is highly unlikely that the Bulls would move on from Lavine. I think their plan is to extend Lavine a max contract, which he will accept, and there is no way the Bulls would prioritize Coby White over Lavine and letting Lavine leave and then just making Coby the starting shooting guard. That would be a big downgrade for the Bulls, and I highly doubt that would ever be the Bulls' intentional plan. That would be more of a contingency if they just weren't able to hang on to Lavine more than anything. I'll end it there for this week, though, guys. Thanks to all of those who left their hot takes. Feel free to leave any hot takes in the comments for next week. Also, be sure to tune in tomorrow. I have a very exciting guest. I was able to interview my first former Bulls player, so stay tuned for that. As always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.